In this session, we'll try to understand the first statement. First statement is one of the very important statements in loops in Java. So it is also a kind of a loop statement which is used to execute a set of statements or a block of code repeatedly more than once. First, let us understand the syntax of for. The syntax of for looks something like this. For within the parenthesis, you have three parts. The first part is initialization. So what do you mean by this initialization? Is basically the loop always will be based on how many number of times the loop will be executed, right? So now the loop has to be terminated after a specific number of iterations. That basically we write some expressions which will decide how many number of times the loop should be executed. So it is always going to be some kind of a variable or data which will decide the count or the number of times the loop should be executed. That is what you call it as a loop counter. So in the first block of for, we initialize that loop counter. So the initialization refers to a variable which decides how many number of times the loop should execute. So that is what is basically called as initialization. And then the second part is the expression. The expression is nothing but a condition which will be evaluated either to true or false. So until the given condition is true in the second part, so the loop will be continued. And the third part is some operation. So usually we perform some operations on the loop counter, either increment it or decrement it or perform certain kind of operation to decide to terminate the loop after a specific number of iterations. So whatever the operation that you do, that will do it in the third part. So then you have the code, nothing but the code what basically needs to execute by using first statement. So first statement is one of the most important and most widely used loop statements in Java. So let us understand first statement programmatically.
Hey, thanks for watching our content so far. If you are new to Training Monk, we're the fastest growing technology training company and create content to help freshers like you to master the disruptive technologies like full stack development, AML, cloud, DevOps, etc. If you like the content so far, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon not to miss any new content from us. Like and share this video with all your friends. Let's build your career and the community together.
To demonstrate that, I'm now taking a new Java class. So here I'm just going to say this as for test or file for loop test or whatever you can give. I'm just giving my main method. First let me write the syntax of the first statement. The for you have is an initialization, the first part. Then you have an expression, the second part. And third one, I'm calling it as an operation, that whatever you want to do on the loop counter. So then the code that what you want to execute. So this is what is the syntax of first statement and looks very simple, but this part is very important. Now let us understand the first statement with a simple example. Now I'm going to take the same example of printing numbers from 1 to 10. Okay, so now how we are going to do that with for? So now again, what are we doing? We are taking a number 1 and incrementing that number every time till it reaches to 10, and then I need to increment that variable value by 1 all the time. So this logic we have already seen in while and do while. Now how we are going to do that with for is, now the number that whatever you are printing, right? So from 1 to 10 or whatever, I'm now taking this as an integer, right? So here integer number is equals to 1. Okay. Now the number less than or equal to 10. So I'm just giving the condition here and I'm using the increment operation here. So I'll explain you how these three things will work. Now I'm just going to write this out and the number plus number, right? So this is how you print from 1 to 10, but let us understand how the first statement will be executed. But before that, first let me run to see the output. Now when I see this, so now basically it print me from 1 to 10. You can see this number 1 to 10. Now but how it is executed is very important. Now when you write a first statement, now I have defined a variable here. You see, this is what is basically called as declaration or initialization or whatever you call it as. So I'm now declaring the loop counter. Now the number is a loop counter here, which is a type of int. Number is 1. So I'm declaring this and initializing that to 1. So here I'm initializing the data. And once this initialization happens, it goes to the second part. Means it just checks this condition. What is this condition? Number, the value of number is 1 and 1 less than or equal to 10. The condition is true. Then it will enter into the for loop. Means what? It won't go to the third part. It directly enters into the for loop and execute this code. What we are doing here? We are printing number. What is the value of number? 1. So now that 1 got printed. So this is what I got in the first iteration. Right? When it reaches end, then it goes to the third department or third part of your first statement. That is your operation. So what is the operation here I'm doing? I'm incrementing this number to 1. Right? So now incrementing it by 1. So what basically this will do? Now number will be incremented by 1. So number will become 2. And once this operation is done, it will come back to the expression again. So means 2 less than or equal to 10. Now the condition is true. So then it will enter and then will print this. Now the second iteration, number value is 2. So it printed. And when it reaches end, it goes to the third block. So now if you look at or notice, the initialization executed only once. Means once it is initialized, it won't go back to the initialization again. Just checks the condition. If it is true, it will execute the code. Once it reaches end of for, goes to the third block and then execute this and come back to the condition, but it never goes back to the declaration. Declaration will be done only once. That's it. So like this, after this 2 is condition is true, then prints, then it will become 3 less than or 10, condition true, prints 3, it will become 4, 5, 6 till 10 less than or equal to 10, condition is true, then it prints 10, then when it reaches end, number will become 11 less than or equal to 10, condition false, so it will come out. So like this, the first statement will be executed. Now the same thing that we have done with while. So if you can look at that, we have taken byte number is equal to 1 or int whatever. So now I'll say while number less than or equal to 10. So then we were using a out, right? With number plus number, right? And we are doing this incrementation. So now if you can look at this, this does the same task and this does the same task, but it will have more readability. And the question comes like, hey, when do I use while or when do I use for, right? So the first statement will have more readable, and there is a concept of lifetime of variables or the scope of variables, which you'll understand in our further courses. So based on that, we use either for or while, right? So in most of the cases, when you want to run your loop, we'll use for, which is very easy for using it. But while also we'll use, but in a different context. That in order to understand this better, you have to understand the concept of scopes. So at that time, I'll just explain you like when to choose while or when to use for. So, but in a typical normal loop, both of them will work fine. But for is more prescribed and very readable to execute a loop at a number of iterations and done your task, right? So this is, I'm deleting it at this moment. So this is simply how the first statement will work. Now let us understand some of the important points about for. Now when I say this initialization, expression and operation, all these three are optional. So means you can provide initialization or not, it is up to you. Provide expression or not, up to you. And operation or not, up to you. So these three are optional. Java does not enforce you to pass this data when you are using for. But what actually happens in case you don't pass this? Now let us understand with an example. Suppose I'm writing this for, and then I'm just putting only two blocks. Now here one semicolon and then another semicolon, means this is your initialization, this is your expression, this is your operation, which I'm not doing it. Now let us say that I just write an S out, right? Saying hello or something like that, just normal message. I'm not getting any compilation error. Why? Because these three are optional. Now in this case, we need to understand how this first statement will be executed, because I don't have any loop counter initialization. When I go to the condition, at least condition should be there, right? So this will decide whether to execute this loop or not. So when you don't give any expression or condition, by default the for condition will be true always. So if it is not, you're not passing anything, by default it is considered to be true. So when it is true, what actually happens? This executes infinite number of times, right? Because there is no operation to decide how many number of times that loop should execute. It will be true all the time. So this is an example of infinite loop, and then you don't have any operation also. Now when I run this, you can see that it just prints me from 1 to 10, and after that it prints me hello infinite number of times, because by the default it is a infinite loop. So now I'm stopping this. Now what actually happens here if I give true? Okay, now this is also an infinite loop. Why? Because by default you're giving it to true, and that is a default option. So whenever you run this, what basically happens? It again same, prints hello infinite number of times, right? So suppose what actually happens if I give it false here, right? So now you are getting an error here saying that, what it is saying, loop condition is always false, making the loop body unreachable. It's saying that, hey, Java is intelligent enough. When you're saying false, you yourself is giving a false statement, then this code is unreachable, no? Then it is saying that why you're writing this code, which is not at all recommended to do. So that's what it is giving you an error itself, saying that, hey, the loop for condition or the loop body is completely unreachable, right? So this is what basically you can pass a value. But when you see true, it is not giving you any error for infinite loop, because it is programmatically you are giving true, so that this code will be reachable, and then you are executing it repeatedly. So that is how you should be so careful of passing the data and whatever, right? So now the second important thing, so now I'm commenting this out just to say this as an infinite loop, or you might find it in some questions, so that can help you out. An example of infinite loop, right? Example of infinite loop, right? So now let us understand some of the things. Now example, suppose in many for statements you always will see an increment operator or a decrement operator. Suppose you want to print from 10 to 1. Okay, so suppose what do? Suppose I want to print number from 10 to 1. So in this case, what I need to do? For int, the number, that what I am doing here, I need to initialize it to 10. So I need to decrement it now, right? Instead of incrementing it, I'm coming from top to down. So now what I need to do? First, number is 10. Then I'll say number greater than or equal to 1. So now I need to say greater than or equal to 1. I need to execute it till it reaches to 1. Then I'll say number minus minus. I'm decrementing it, right? So now I'll just print this out. The number is plus number. So in order to separate these two, I'm just using a line separator here. Okay. Now first output I'm printing from 1 to 10, and this I'm printing from 10 to 1. Okay. Guys, what actually happens here if I give less than or equal to 1? Then this is wrong. So always this condition will be true, right? So now if you can look at this 10 greater than or equal to 1, 10 less than or equal to 1, this condition is false, right? It won't even execute, right? So now here it should be greater than or equal to 1. So now first 10 condition is true, then it will print 10, then it will become 9, right? 9 greater than 1. So like that every time it decrements by 1, and then we'll print this here. So now let me save this and run to see what is the output that I'll get. So the first I got 1 to 10, and second I got 10 to 1 in the reverse one. So now the operation typically what you use here is always increment or decrement. Okay. But here you can pass any operation. It could be a method call or any other operation that gives you just value or something like that. So now what I do here, just a tricky question. So now I'm using something like this. Int number is equal to 1. Okay. Now I'll say number less than or equal to 10. Right. Now here I'm using a out. Okay. I'm calling a method here. Right. So now I'm just printing number plus number. Okay. Now I'll remove this one. Okay, now what I do here, I do number plus equals 2. Okay, see this is a very strange first statement, and you don't get this kind of first statement anywhere, but this will help us understanding how first statement executed. Okay, now let us see how it will be executed. So the number will be initialized to 1. 1 less than or equal to 10 condition is true, so it enters here. Number is incremented by number is added with 2, means what? Number will become 3 here. So once it reaches here, then it goes here, right? It prints 3. 3 less than or equal to 10, 2. Then 3 will become 5. So it prints 5. Then 5 less than 10, true. Then 5 plus 2, it will become 7. It prints 7. 7 less than 10, true. It will become 9. It will print 9. 9 less than 10, true. It will become 11. 11. It prints 11 less than or equal to 10 condition false. So that is how it is going to be executed. So let me run this to see output. So what basically happened? If you can see here, guys, you see here, it printed 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. So that is how this first statement is executed. So whenever you see the first statement is always, you'll see like this. So initialization, expression, and then the operation. The operation could be anything. Now here you can print, or you can call a method or whatever, and then you can do whatever the logic. So don't get confused whenever you come across these kind of code. So try to execute this according to the flow and then decide what is the output, right? So instead of increment, you might use number is equal to plus 5. Then always it will be added with 5. So like that, it's not increment and decrement all the time. You can pass whatever the value or whatever the operation that you want to perform here. You can do that on the loop counter. So this is how the first statement works. A very simple statement, a very simple example.